Mombasa Road has taken you through the health subject for today. And for now, 18 days from now, we will be heading to the fresh presidential election, but a lot is happening. Political grandstanding, amendments or proposed amendments on electoral laws, NASA demonstrations, which now head to 3 days in a week. What would be the role of the clergy and some other very important stakeholders? Is dialogue something we might want to explore as a country? What are some of the legal implications of whether we have an election or whether not? What would follow? My gentlemen, I'll introduce my panel, not my gentleman, my panel in studio right now. Muthomi Fiankolu is a lawyer who's dealt with a lot of election cases or electoral related cases in the country. We have Reverend Elias Agola, who's a member of the National Council of Churches Kenya Committee, Nairobi branch. And finally, Daniel Juma from the Global Peace Foundation. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me here on KTN Weekend Prime. I think I'll start with you, Reverend Agola, because the clergy has been accused time and again of not coming out and putting its foot forward as far as the grandstanding, political grandstanding that we're seeing in the country with the amendments and the demonstrations, and just 18 days to go. What's the clergy's stand on the electoral impasse in the country currently?
Good evening, viewers. My name is Agola, as has been said. Come to you from NCCK. Yes. And when NCCK is mentioned, I'm sure it has become a household. Definitely. In every person's house, there's NCCK all over, talking about issues that touch on this country and how this country is supposed to be properly governed. And so when somebody says that clergy is quiet, is it that the clergy is quiet because they have not been given enough airtime? Or is it that the clergy is quiet because we talk and nobody hears? I think the clergy has not been quiet, and the church has never been quiet on issues of governance, on issues of elections. And if we can remember, NCCK was the springboard that brought in the issue of IEBC, the IEBC that we have today. So what is the stand? Our stand is that the elections are there on 26th. And Kenya has to be calm, and the political class has to do just what they should do to ensure that there is peace in this country. So our message is the message of peace, the message of cohesion, that we need to do things, but according to the law, within the law, and to ensure that at the tail end we will have peace in this country. The country is very evidently divided along political lines. That's true. Currently, as the clergy is there cause for concern? Are you worried for the country? This has always concerned the clergy and the church and the religious sector as a whole, and we've always talked about it. Just the other day, we were in Jumuiya and we talked about the need for peace, the need for cohesion, the need for understanding, the need for the political divide to come down and do not talk to Kenyans about their irreducible minimum, yes, but talk about what is it that Kenya is going to gain. And that is still what we are talking about as a church, that we need to at least sober up and think Kenya and not think individuals or individual parties or party concerns. NASA have a right to say what they are saying. Jubilee have a right to say what they are saying. But all this that they are saying should gear towards bringing Kenya that will end up saying we are happy to be in this country. Daniel Juma, from the Global Peace Foundation, the country is anxious, 18 days to go. We don't even know whether we'll have these elections, given the political temperatures in the country currently. Your thoughts?
Thank you very much. Elections are meant to help Kenyans to be able to elect their leaders. Elections were never meant to divide the country or to put us in a state of war, near war, a state of uncertainty like it is today. The Supreme Court ordered that the IEBC should conduct another election within 90 days. 60 days. Strict adherence to the Constitution. It happened when it found that there were irregularities.
All right, okay. I would just want you to hold on to that thought. I'm coming to you, Daniel, because he raises very important concerns on what the Supreme Court ruled as far as the Constitution conduct elections in the next 60 days with the laws that we already have, but of course we are seeing proposed changes in the law. Mudomi, what are the legal implications of some of these actions we are taking, like amending the electoral laws?
One, we need to be clear that, at least from my reading, and I've read that bill, 99% of the proposals in that bill are unconstitutional. That is to say, they're inconsistent with the supreme law of the land. And if they are passed the way they are, it will be an exercise in futility, because you don't need to be a genius to know someone will move to court and have the whole exercise declared unconstitutional, null and void. The 0.1%, and this, to be specific, is only with regard to the clause that they are proposing to punish returning and presiding officers who infringe, or rather who mess the forms and therefore leading to nullification of elections, is not necessary. So that this bill in its entirety, in my very humble view, is an exercise in hubris. The political class is just grad studying, confusing the country without any good cause. We do not need those changes to conduct the repeat election. Yes. Okay.
I'll go back to Daniel now. You're mentioning something about drawing your example from what really the Supreme Court said when they were annulling this whole exercise.
Yeah, so what I was saying is that the Supreme Court made a ruling, which we really as Kenyans have to appreciate, that they recognize that there were irregularities and illegalities that IEBC committed. Moving forward, we have not seen any significant changes within the IEBC that can give confidence to Kenyans that they are prepared to do these elections in 18 days' time. Now, and then the two sides, NASA and Jubilee, their body language show us that they are not ready for these elections. You know, Jubilee is doing everything it can to introduce new laws, which is basically to confuse the whole electoral environment. At the same time, NASA is sending a message that there will be no elections. So my advice is, why don't we just do away with these elections? I mean, I know that the gender bill, for example, you know, was supposed to have been passed. It wasn't passed.
But I'm thinking an election is much big of a deal, really.
But we have a precedent. I mean, the system is working. So what my advice is, why can't we give them time to organize themselves? Why can't we give IEBC time to make internal, changes within itself, so that, because look at it this way, there are people within the IEBC that committed illegalities. The IEBC should demonstrate to Kenyans that they're actually doing that, dealing with those issues. But you see a situation whereby the political class does not give the IEBC the opportunity, the independence that they need to deal with its own problems. They're interfering.
So is it just the IEBC we are giving time to figure out this election, or also the political parties to strategize?
So, if you look at it this way, it is Kenyans who are suffering. Look, how we spend 50 billion shillings in these elections. We're going to spend more than 10 billion shillings in these new elections. And look at the nurses on strike. We don't have enough money to waste. So someone should pay for these illegalities. And you find out that the same people within the IEBC are going to do these elections. So for me, it's a joke. I mean, what elections? Yeah.
You mentioned something, a narrative that we've had with even NASA saying that we don't really need to rush into this election. If we're not ready, let's give it time. It's not a must. We do it on the 26th of October. On different quarters, we've had a number of people say there will be no elections on October the 26th. And here is where I want me to tell us. In the event we have an election, what follows? What does the law say? In the event we do not have an election, what do we expect?
Now, the only way you can fail to have an election on 26th is, in my humble understanding, if, say, Kenya suffers a calamity that makes it practically impossible to have this election. Otherwise, the IEBC would be in breach of the order from the court. But I must clarify, I'm one of those who believe, actually, that there is a way within the law for altering the date of that election. If for any reason it is not practicable, the IEBC can move back to the Supreme Court and tell the court that they have difficulties of this or the other type that make it impossible or impracticable to hold a credible election within the 60 days. And what they would simply be asking is the court should extend the time within which they would do it. I would imagine an application of that type would also have a prayer clarifying what is the status of the office of the presidency during the extended period. Yeah. And we have precedent in the past when we have held an election on a date other than the one envisioned by the Constitution. If I may give you an obvious example, in the year 2013, we held an election in March, yet this election would ideally have been held either in August 2012 or in August 2013. And the only reason it was held in March is that there was a judicial intervention in which the courts ruled that although the general date for holding elections is the second Tuesday of August, that particular election, for the reason set out in that judgment, could be held on a different date, which happened to be 4th of March, the year 2013. And to me, the only legal way you can avoid holding an election on 26th of October is by going back to the court and making a case and persuading the court that you have legitimate reasons for wanting to hold that election on a different day.
And that most likely should be the IEBC because they're conducting the process.
Ideally, it should be the IEBC. The only problem I've observed, and I've had many commentaries on the IEBC seems to believe in this philosophy that if you give them two evils, they will choose the bigger one. So if you check the history, especially through the last 13 or so months, IEBC has faced numerous challenges of a legal or political type, and in virtually every one of them, IEBC chose to go the more difficult route. So I wouldn't be surprised that even such a proposal will not be taken kindly from their quarters.
Bless your thoughts.
I think my two colleagues have handled it the way it was supposed to. But I would say that what my prayer would be for this country and for the people involved in this political contest should be that we look at the bigger good for this country. Because yes, we are going to the elections, and somebody will win, somebody will lose. But what are we seeing in this country?
But this bigger picture is what the political class seemingly won't see.
They don't see, and I don't think they will see. So they need to give sectors like the religious sector an opportunity to talk to them. We have always done this before. When Kenya has been in a crisis, the religious community has always come in and have always brought the voice of reason. And that is what we are praying for, that they will listen to the religious community.
Does this mean that you're vouching for dialogue in this particular situation?
That's exactly what we are looking for. And we should not be misinterpreted to be forging for a nusu mukate or a nusu whatever. What we are talking about, just like the other day, we gave out a statement, and we said that we should look for a way of bringing a Kenya that is more inclusive. That we don't talk of losers and we don't talk of winners. Of course, winners are needed and losers are needed. But when we talk of a Kenya where everybody matters, regardless of what you got, then we are talking of a Kenya that will be more cohesive and a Kenya that will be more, more inclusive. Where the common mwananchi will not be suffering every other five years. Like now, today, we are having the nurses in the streets and the patients dying at home or on arrival to the hospitals because nobody is taking care of them. Yet, that is a very pertinent issue that we should be focusing on. But what are we focusing on? We are focusing on NASA, we are focusing on Jubilee, we are focusing on, IEBC must go home or the laws have to be changed. That is loss of priority. We need to prioritize Kenyans as the people who gave the political class the platform for leadership, for governance, and so that they do not, see us to be a stepping stone to their comfort while we are suffering.
You've said that you're vouching for dialogue as
yes.
NCK or even the,
the Interreligious Council of Kenya. Yeah.
Have you reached out to any of these parties, be it NASA, Jubilee, or even the IEBC, the referee in this game?
We've done that severally, and you remember, Akisa, even today in the news, in the news there was Alhaji Murigo talking about it. We had Dr. Makanda from NCCK talking about it in the public participation at Parliament. And what we are craving for and what we are asking for every time and what we are voicing for and pushing for is, can Kenyans sit before a crisis? Are we waiting for us to kill ourselves and then we say, oh, let us come and sit? We are here as the religious sector to bring Kenyans together and to ask Kenyans to reason as brothers and sisters so that we don't shed innocent blood, we don't ruin our country, and then we come and say, oh, we wish we knew. The religious community is here today to bring this, let me call them, for lack of a better word, these warring parties onto the table and ask ourselves, what can we come up with? Because Kenya is supposed to be there even after these politicians today. Yes.
All right, Daniel, from the Global Peace Foundation, we seem to be in agreement that political temperatures have really flared up in this country. What are you doing to calm them?
Well, we have been reaching out. We have been reaching out to both parties, and especially IEBC, to find out what is the problem. Are there issues that we can help you to be able to solve? And, it appears that even though IEBC may say they are ready, but I mean, there are issues. What NASA calls minimums. And then what IEBC, what Jubilee is trying to solve through the amendments. And you see the chairperson of IEBC saying we don't want these changes. You get my point? Now, what we have been saying is that even though the Supreme Court did not rule that anyone in the IEBC was found culpable, but it said that there were illegalities. Now, the IEBC must be accountable. It needs to have done an internal audit, and I'm sure it did, and find out who did what. And it should communicate to Kenyans and say, look, this is what we did, and so is culpable, and this is what we are recommending.
Do you think that would be the remedy to what we are experiencing now?
Because what we lack right now, the reason why you see the contestations between NASA and Jubilee is that NASA is not, and for good reasons, they're afraid to go back to an election with the same secretariat that caused those illegalities. And as you give them a chance, they won that case. So they need to be the ones actually being heard. But you see, if the other side is also saying that they don't want changes within. So I think Kenyans, at some point, I know this is a crisis, but let's use this crisis to get a sustainable solution. Rather than agonizing, I think we need to organize ourselves and help them. Maybe they don't want elections now. We can agree, the religious communities, civil society, come together, the media, and say, fine, how can we help them help themselves? Because at the end of the day, these elections are supposed to be, for the benefit of the Kenyan people. And if it is done, if it's not done well on the 26th, we will go back to the same situation. And both NASA and Jubilee will be throwing tantrums.
It's like a cycle.
Yeah, they will be doing that. And then, but we are losing money, we are losing time, our kids are not going to school. And, we are the ones suffering. The economy is suffering. So rather, just like the lawyer said, find out the legal way where these elections can be pushed. Maybe even 6 months, even 1 year.
But then what kind of mood will that put the country into? We are always anxious in an election period, Daniel.
But the thing is, President Kenyatta and Mr. Raila, they need to agree. Can Mr. Chebukati sit down with Mr. Kenyatta and Mr. Raila and tell them, what do you want? What do you want me to do? How do we go about it? But this dialogue, to get them to sit together, is not going to happen. So they need to be the bigger people here. Yes.
I want the lawyer to just spell it out for us. Since the Supreme Court ruling, legally, what should we be seeing the IEBC do? Because it's the most critical body in this particular season, so to speak, that we are in.
The Supreme Court said the election was nullified because there were irregularities and illegalities, which are detailed in the judgment. What I would expect a serious electoral management body to be doing is explaining to the country, not just to the NASA and Jubilee, saying that these are the illegalities and irregularities that led to the nullification of this important election, and these are the steps we are taking to ensure that this does not happen again. Anything short of that, for me, shows the electoral management body perhaps is not taking its mandate seriously. But there was something the bishop was saying which I think needs further development. You see, Akisa, I've always wondered if our politicians fought for public health, for the education system, for agriculture, for industrialization, with the passion with which they fight to capture political office, how wonderful this country should be. And maybe the discussion we should be having is why is it the wrangles and the disagreements and the fights are always about capturing state office and not on the things that matter for the citizens. And to me, my understanding is you need to study the political economy and history of Kenya and realize that for the most part, the Kenyan state has been an instrument of oppression and exploitation right from its inception in 1897 when the colonialists landed here. And for me, what we think, maybe the 2010 constitution, though a very good effort at reconfiguring our nation state, maybe missed out. We don't seem to have figured out how to tame the capture of the state by business and criminal cartels. Because if you check out the political class, the only thing that is innate for them is to capture state power and the economic opportunities that come with state patronage and capturing the state power. That's why you will never find fist fights in parliament over the state of our roads or any of the things that actually should matter in a civilized
So
country.
for you, the conversation needs a complete
Yeah, for me, this whole conversation is actually misguided because we are talking about the symptoms rather than the causes of the problem. But to the legal issues, I think I gave you the answer. The IEBC should just explain to us.
All right, Muthoni. I want to get the parting shots, and I think yours has been a bit powerful. We need to change this conversation once and for all, and especially the stakeholders. Daniel, parting shots. I want us to wrap it up here.
So, my parting shots are that the Constitution's, the Supreme Court said that we go for a new election. But I don't think Kenyans want another sham election. The elections, if and when it is done, should be in strict adherence to the Constitution. So we should get it right this time. So I would rather if the political class is not ready now, let's take a breath. And I'm sure the lawyers have advised that, we can find a solution. But let's take a breath and organize well so that we get it right this time.
What do we expect to see from the clergy? There have been a few suggestions here from Daniel and Muthoni. Do you think they're worth exploring, especially as far as just postponing this election, so to speak?
Yeah, everything is possible provided we have a political goodwill from the political actors. And should the IEBC, say this is how we would like to approach this, because we don't want to see any bloodshed. We don't want to see any group of people saying they are not properly handled during these elections, which may bring more trouble to the country. The IEBC should come in and say, yes, the Supreme Court said we should have the elections, but looking at the scenario, we may not be ready for these elections. So they can give us the option out. However, I would like to say that Kenyans should stand for Kenyans and not for politicians. Kenyans should stand for Kenyans and not for politicians. Because we've always stood for politicians yes. In their class, and they have never made us better. They have never made us good. They have never made us any best. They have always made sure that we are down, or the common mwananchi is down, and they are up. And that is what they thrive in. So I would like to call on Kenyans that they consider dying for Kenya and not for politicians. Because politicians will never die for them. They are our leaders, we elect them. But immediately they get the ticket, they are never ours. So let us think Kenya, and let NASA not think going to the streets will solve the problem of Kenya, and let Jubilee not think that going to the parliament and changing laws and constitutionally, as the lawyer said, will help this country. This country needs the support to the institutions that are properly laid down in the Constitution.
All right. Gentlemen, I would like us to wrap it up at this point. Thank you very much for coming in. Muthomi Thiankolu is a lawyer. Reverend Elias Agola is a member of the NCCK Committee Nairobi branch. And finally, Daniel Juma is from the Global Peace Foundation. Gentlemen, once again, thank you very much for coming in for this very important discussion. 18 days to go. We'll be tracking the situation, seeing the latest developments in the election scene. This is how we wrap it up here on KTN Weekend Prime. Thank you very much for being with me since 9 p.m. My name is Akisa Wandera. Have yourselves a lovely night, a lovely Sunday tomorrow, and keep it KTN News. I'll be seeing you on Monday on KTN News Desk at 1 p.m.